I think I'm saying that we struggle all our lives to answer it. That it's the struggle that is important. That's what helps us to define our place in the universe.
This is Beverly, Dr. Beverly, Dr. Beverly Crusher. Honest.
Forceful.
Trusting.
Brilliant.
Strong.
And adventurous.
And this is Crusher Convo.
Hello, everyone. It is Jessie here at Crusher Convo. Thank you for joining me today as I decide to discuss the story of Jack and Beverly Crusher, or the lack thereof, actually. So, but yeah, just a little bit about me if this is your first time hearing me or anything like that. So I had started a podcast last year about me and my co-host deep diving the next generation from the eyes of Beverly Crusher. And I feel that Beverly Crusher is a very important character and that she embodies everything that Star Trek represents. And so I always try to bring her more into the light and talk about her and things like that, and the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever the stories may be. But yeah, so I decided to come back in a live YouTube way just to talk about Beverly Crusher. I mean, I think one of the things is just I love talking with other Star Trek fans, and I love their insight, and I love, just how everyone has their own idea about how the stories are and things like that. And it can be very good, engaging conversations. And I think Beverly Crusher is a good example of that. So before I get started, I do have some episodes I'm going to be talking about that kind of highlight the relationship of Jack and Beverly. And also I have a couple of, as I had liked to call it, the Nemechek It Out, which is Larry Nemechek's companion book. He has a bunch of insight from each of the episodes behind the scene, just wonderful little things that I just absolutely eat up. And so I'm going to be mentioning that. And then, of course, a little bit about Star Trek Picard, because that kind of plays into it a little bit. So, but I see Ro had come in. I love this, where I guess there's a competition between Ro from Scarif Podcast and Tim from FSF, but thank you, Ro. And then make it so. There he is. There. Hi, Ro. And then Sarah, it is nice to see you. So hello. Please feel free, comment. We'll chat. I'll bring up your guys' comments. That was kind of the big thing about Crusher Convo, is I really wanted it to be a conversation and just kind of deep dive and get into it. My little slogan was crushing one episode at a time. And so that's what this is. We're just going to crush it no matter what. So I think the first thing that I will go ahead and jump in the very beginning, right? I mean, it was a 2-hour episode, and you kind of could tell there was something going on, a history between Beverly and Jean-Luc Picard. And you just didn't know what. And of course, their first encounter is when she sees him on the bridge and they have this eye-locking moment. I am a Crusher fan. Don't get me wrong. I love Picard and Beverly, but it all started with Jack. And that was kind of that moment that, she even said, like, when she introduced Wesley, because Wesley was behind her, and she says, the last time you saw him was long ago when, and she stopped. And he kind of knew, like, the last time I saw you was when Jack had died. So that was a good start, because you're wondering what is going on. What is their history? We're just barely learning about these characters. And they don't really say much, but you think they're going to say more later on. We'll get into that. But I'm curious if there was anything, anyone in here, you guys could comment also on Twitter, or I still call it Twitter. I don't call it X, Twitter, or my Instagram page, which is Crusher Convo, of what your hopes were, of what your thoughts were when you first saw that. Now, I just saw The Next Generation for the first time 2 years ago. So I'm very, very new. And this is probably why sponged, absorbed all this information, because there's a lot, between all of the series, and it's like what, over 900 episodes of Star Trek, it all intertwines in some way. So I think for this particular story, it set the story narrative to be about Picard and Beverly, obviously, but we didn't really get enough information, especially in that first episode. But I think the hopes were that we were going to learn more. I had to mention Encounter at Farpoint. It's not the greatest episode, but I think it was enough for people to be engaged for them to come back and watch it, right? That's kind of your hope. Even though you could tell there was rewrites, which if everyone knows the story, it was written by DC Fontana, but then it was rewrote by Gene Roddenberry. And so there was kind of a back and forth. But I think overall it was able to present itself in a way that got people to come back. Now, Sarah says, there's so much said in their eye-locking moment that isn't verbally said. And it's very true. I think for Patrick and Gates, I mean, I don't know what it said in the script. I probably should have read that part. It was a powerful moment where a lot of people wondered if there was a romantic history between the two, because there is a moment when Wesley is talking to Beverly in sickbay, and he's talking about all the stuff that he's found on the ship and that he really wanted to go on the bridge. She was saying that was against the captain's orders. And she had mentioned that, Starfleet captains, they have no chance to have a family, right? But then she does this look where there's like there's just an emotional like baggage, like there's something there, and you're just like, what is going on? I don't know if that was written in the script. Maybe Gates, because I know Gates was told that she was supposed to be a romantic interest for the captain, so I think she played it that way. But I just love that look. And a lot of you know, especially on Instagram, I'm a vidder. I create stories through videos of clips of shows and put music to it, so it kind of creates its own thing. And one of them was the story of Patrick. Just kidding. Picard and Beverly. And that was one of those moments that I had to put in, right? So yeah, I definitely love that part in the episode. It really got to me, and that's kind of the moment where I was like, I'm really engaged with this character, Beverly Crusher. I want to know more. So yeah. And Sarah also says, and let's just say that what I wrote in my fanfic did happen. It's so much better for it to be canon. I'm not sure if I read your fanfic. I read a lot of fanfic, so I probably did. But the fans understand where the story should have gone. And I know in a lot of times you can't tell everything all at once. But these episodes that I'm going to mention, we should have gotten something. So that's the frustrating part right there. But I think the next episode I'm going to have to talk about is Where No One Has Gone Before. Now, this is that cringy episode where we see the Traveler and we learn that Wesley is gifted. We're just not really sure what. And the reason why I say cringy is because the Traveler is a little odd, and especially I'm speaking for myself, kind of obsessed with Wesley at this point. And it just gets worse later on in the series. But this one was very, very interesting. I had already known about this, so I was kind of happy that it was also mentioned here in Larry's book. I know. So right here, he talks about, so in the original teleplay, Kaczynski, he was supposed to be the warp specialist, when in reality, the Traveler was doing all the work, says was responsible for both the warp effects and the accident. He also had a son who felt he had spent more time in his career with him, which they took out in the script. The crew was in awe of Kaczynski and in the original script, and the hallucinations were even more bizarre, which included an image of Jack Crusher appearing to both Picard and Beverly, and they cut it out. We did get an image of Picard's mother, who we had known had died. But, we don't know when she died. We thought she died of old age. Of course, we find out in Star Trek Picard, she unfortunately, had killed herself, unfortunately, and that haunted him. And so they had those family moments. Like, they could have done it, And I thought it would have been really important, especially because the episode was focused on Wesley, right? So since they're trying to say that there's something special about Wesley, it would have been nice to show Jack. And it would have been nice to have another one of those eye-locking moments that Sarah had mentioned when they saw Jack. Because at this point, we're not really sure the severe, like what had happened to Jack. We knew he was Picard's best friend. We knew, I don't even know if we even knew at this point, but later on we found that out. And later on we found out that Picard was, I don't want to say the reason of his passing, but he couldn't help him, and that's why Jack died. So it would have been really good to actually show this scene of Beverly and Picard seeing a ghostly image or something of Jack and kind of bringing more of that story to light, because Jack is very, very important in their story. Their story specifically is very, very important. We needed to have those moments, right? So knowing that they had the idea, but then didn't go through with it was kind of upsetting. I was very upset because I thought that would have added more weight to their story, and it almost just felt like it was brushed aside, which we get that a lot in the series, where a lot of it is just brushed aside. But that's why I wanted to mention that, because it would have really, really helped the story overall. The next one is going to be the battle. The battle was an episode of where a Ferengi was seeking like vigilante justice for his son, blaming Picard. I mean, Picard did kill his son, but it was through self-defense. But this Ferengi didn't believe that. And he had the Stargazer, which was the ship that Picard had captained prior to the Enterprise, where Jack Crusher was his number one. And Beverly is very heavily in this episode because she knew something was wrong. He was having headaches. He wasn't feeling well. He thought he was just anxious. And all of a sudden, they're on the ship and they're showing his old quarters and he's reminiscing. Not one mention of Jack. And going back, as I'm watching this for the first time, I obviously didn't realize that until later on, that Jack was a part of the Stargazer. So as you rewatch it, you're just like, it's almost like they forgot. And she doesn't mention Jack. And there's no, I don't even think there was even a story added that Jack was even going to be mentioned. Again, another missed opportunity. This was about Picard's past that directly was in line with Jack. Beverly was there. This could have been another moment of them having a one-on-one, reminiscing about Jack, and we didn't get it. So I feel this is where the frustration starts to come in. And I can't speak for fans back 37 years ago, but I'm sure there was some frustration going on, especially for the Beverly fans, just because they're getting little pieces, but they're not getting the full story, right? It's kind of like they're dangling the carrot, right? And it's like, we're almost there, but we're not going to give it to you. Sarah says they could have had a flashback with Jack on the bridge, but I saw somewhere online that the Battle of Maxima happened before Jack was on the Stargazer. I heard, actually, that could have been true. I'm not sure. I heard that this happened after Jack died, because this would have been because he had lost the Stargazer at this moment, because it got set on fire. He had done the Picard maneuver, which was the warp boom attack, and they all had to abandon ship. And that's where the last time he had the Stargazer. So Jack would have been before the battle. He would have died already by this point. But I just felt that, again, I don't know which story is true. That's just kind of, I think, my assumption, because that's when he lost it. And I knew Jack was on the Stargazer, but there was also probably a no continuity with the story in season 1. So that's probably why. But something, right? Jack mentioned a story, we've we've had a couple of stories, which I'm going to mention in some episodes, not about with Picard, but with Wesley. Yeah, it just would have been helpful to add some weight to their story because everyone's kind of curious what's going on. So yeah, I think that's just kind of where it was. But Sarah, that was a very good point to bring up there. This episode, Skin of Evil, which is where Tasha Yar is tragically killed, a very, anticlimactic death. The reason why I brought this up really has nothing to do with Jack or Beverly's story. It was very focused about losing Tasha and all that stuff. But in Tasha's funeral, and I had posted this image on my Crusher Combo Instagram. I found it on Pinterest. I did not create this, but I thought it was very important. The thing that because she was mentioning about what she learned from each of her crewmates. And the thing she said about Beverly was this: your fierce devotion comes from within and can't be diminished. For you, I learned to strive for excellence, no matter what the personal cost. It was a very, very good representation of who Beverly is, especially the very end of no matter what the personal cost, because as we learn about Beverly's story, I'm a big nerd when it comes to continuity and timelines and all that stuff. From what I could figure out, because some things don't make sense. Jack and Beverly were together for a short time, were only married for a short time. She was only like 29 or 30 when Jack died. She has a 5-year-old son. She's I believe she's in medical school at this point still. Like, she's not in Starfleet Academy or anything. She graduated from that. But she's still in medical school. She's still, learning to get her license and everything. And now she's a single mom. And she still strived for that. Like, losing Jack didn't stop her from not only doing better for herself, but do better for her son. And she did it alone. We, again, find out later that she doesn't really have much family left. It was just her grandmother. And of course, Picard was out of the picture. So Beverly represented strength in just pushing yourself and striving to do better and striving to do more. And I think Tasha's words really reflect that. So that was kind of the reason why I wanted to bring this up. Like I said, the episode really has nothing to do with Beverly, but I did like what she said about Beverly. So I did have to, bring that up there. The bonding. This is a very, very important episode because we do hear about Jack. And of course, this is an episode where they lost a crew member. This is in season 3. Beverly had just gotten back not too long ago from Starfleet Academy, Starfleet Medical. And they lost a crew member. She had a son. Now the son is an orphan. And so it was bringing up feelings from everybody. Okay. Because, Worf's an orphan. Picard had to deal with this loss. Troy has to help. It was Jeremy Astor. And the Beverly and Wesley scenes, we didn't get a lot, which kind of sucked because Beverly is the one that raised Wesley. And we did not get a lot of Wesley and Beverly scenes. So what we did get, us Beverly fans hold on to as much as we can. I am actually going to be playing the clip because I felt that it was very important to show. So here we go.
Do you ever think about him, Mom?
Your father? Sure I do.
Sometimes I can't even remember what his face looks like. It scares me.
I loved how
It
Gates
happens
played
to all
this.
of us, Wes. Sometimes I can't get his face out of my mind.
Today it's like I can see it all as clearly as if it were yesterday. I can remember the way Dad looked when he hugged me goodbye. Captain Picard's eyes when he came to tell us.
Moment. Okay, so I think this scene was absolutely fantastic. And it's also because you can tell that Jack's death still affects her even 10 plus years later, right? We don't know, you know, they always say, like, as time goes on, the mourning and stuff like that, like every day gets easier, but you never forget the person that you lost. And so here that's why I said Gates played this beautifully, because you could still tell how much his death still affects her and how upset she is and everything. And then also to the point of where it's affecting Wesley and she can't do anything about it. I loved how she said that sometimes I can't get him out of my mind. That means she thinks of him often, right? There are probably moments that she all of a sudden just thinks of Jack as mourning him in private still after all these years. So I did enjoy this to the point of, we got a little nugget of their story and how these two people, Wesley and Beverly, are still mourning the loss of a father and a husband, and how much they would wish they could bring him back at this point. So that's why I really wanted to highlight this scene. I think Will did an amazing job. Again, Gates knocked it out of the park as usual. So now we're in the third season, and I know Gates wasn't in the second season, so they kind of had to do things a little differently, but now we're in the third season, and here we are, just, again, a nugget, just a little something. But I'm very happy that the writers at least brought him into the picture, because they could have done this episode completely like they did in the battle, not mention Jack at all, right? But this was, of course, more of a Wesley story, because he's the one that had to talk to Jeremy, than it is Beverly. So I think that's why it was mentioned, because just misogyny. But anyways, that's why we at least got that moment. Another moment in season 4, which was family. Again, another great episode. This was really good because it showed trauma. Okay. A lot of Star Trek episodes, they can go through some violations and some horrible things. And by the next one, it was like everything's rainbows and unicorns, right? So this, of course, happens after Picard's, I almost said assimilation as a Borg. And he wants to go home, and he's kind of rethinking his life because of everything that he went through. And because everyone's kind of going through something, we're kind of seeing a little bit of, again, Wesley and Worf, just like we saw in the bonding. And this, of course, was another scene that I wanted to mention, because this is where we see that Jack was on the Stargazer. Now, I believe we might have mentioned that I want to say it was Conspiracy, because that is when Picard had mentioned that his two best friends was Walker Keel and Jack Crusher. And I believe they had mentioned maybe a little bit about the Stargazer. I'm not 100% sure. But here, you'll see why he was on the Stargazer.
Something from home? I left it here in storage a long time ago after Jack died. Odds and ends, mostly.
How to advance your career through marriage?
It was a joke. Jack sent it to me when I was still in medical school. It was his way of proposing to me.
What's that?
It's for Wesley from Jack. I'd forgotten it. Maybe I was just trying to forget it.
Why?
Jack recorded a holographic message for Wesley just after he was born. It was a gift for him when he grew up. Jack was going to make many more of them. He never had the chance.
Are you afraid of what it might say?
No. I just don't know if it'll do more harm than good. Wesley's finally come to terms with his father's death.
Wesley has a lot of questions about his father. Things that you can't answer for him. Perhaps seeing this will help him understand.
So again, a wonderful scene, a little nugget that we get from Beverly about Jack. I loved, gosh, Gates is such a good actress. I loved how she's just looking at his uniform and just kind of remembering him in it, right? And just kind of holding on to that memory for a split second before, Troy kind of breaks her of her trance. And as she's going through this stuff, which that book, it's kind of funny. He gave that to her of how to advance her career in marriage. I know some people like think it was his career, but no, it was her career because she was in medical school. So he's all like, hey, you could be still a doctor and be married, I guess he was just trying to be funny. And that was, like she said, that was just his way of proposing. But one of those things of where like he wanted to do, little videos, I guess, for Wesley and to see him grow up in a different way. I think it's sad. Clearly, Jack was away too often to make more of these because he was on the Stargazer. She was clearly on Earth because she was still in school. She's taking care of Wesley because this was the only one that he got to do in the 5 years that he was around. So it was nice that we actually got to see Jack in the hologram or in the holodeck, and Wesley got to see his father and hear his voice because, as he said in the bonding, it scares me because he can't remember what his face looks like, right? So this was a good turnover of where we're learning a little bit more about Jack and Beverly and things like that. But again, that's all we got. We didn't get any more. Even with the Wesley and Beverly scene, she's just letting him know, your father wanted you to do this and I want you to have it because you're 18. That was it. that was the story, or the scene. And then they just moved on to the holodeck and that was it. And I know it was more about Picard's story and I totally understand that. I think from what I recall, they were mentioning that there was going to be probably more Jack in like episodes. They wanted to add it and then they just kept cutting it out. Like, I don't know if it was Rick Berman or things like that, because Gene Roddenberry was actually still alive at this time, but I'm not sure how much involved he was. So I'm going to go to Larry's book again because he mentioned something in here. Oh, there's a lot saying here about Jack. So I guess I'm going to say this actually. So this is Jack Crusher wears the old style uniform as lieutenant, junior grade, in the holotape, but his locker, the case that she had with his last effects, is labeled with the rank of lieutenant commander and the middle initial R. Beverly recalls that he proposed to her when she was in medical school. As a dream image, Doug Wirt would appear as Jack Crusher again in Violations. And I think it also mentions that, this was actually a deleted scene. It said, in an unused sequence from a final draft script, Jack says he's about to report to the Stargazer and that Wesley R. Crusher, a name later seen in Beverly's personal file in Conundrum, was named for Jack's grandfather, Richard Wesley Crusher, who gave Jack his first flying lesson. We also learned that a great-grandfather had a painting on an exhibit on Prado Museum in Madrid. Other Trek continuity touches in the scene, including mentions of a Crusher who was a horse thief on Nimbus 3, which was the planet in Star Trek V, another who served as a Confederate soldier at Bull Run, and a third who died at Station Salem 1, referred to in The Defector as the site of an enemy surprise attack a la Pearl Harbor during an unmentioned war. There was a deleted scene where he was talking about this and they had cut it out for time, but interesting that they were mentioning about Crushers and it was the continuity of bringing back from the original Star Trek movies and stuff like that. That would have been really nice to hear. So we get these little nuggets and then even more nuggets that would have been nice to, that Larry mentions in his book. And then they take it out and you're just like, okay, that's great, but would like to know more about their story. But yeah, it's just another frustration of just not knowing this history, because we're seeing a little bit more about Jack in Wesley's eyes, but we're not seeing it through Beverly's. And this is where that lack of story happens, right, guys? So that's kind of the issue here. Now, later on in season 4, we do get a wonderful episode, a favorite among the Bev fans, which was Remember Me. Remember Me, of course, everyone knows. She's trapped in a warp bubble. People are disappearing. She's not sure what's going on. But the whole reason why she had this sequence, what she created in her mind, was because she was missing Jack. She had her friend come, which was Dallas Quace. Quace, that was his last name. He was talking about losing his wife and stuff like that. And she had mentioned about not having many years with Jack, but when you lose someone forever and then she gets quiet, those are those moments where you know that losing Jack still affects her to this day, even though she's still carrying on with her life. It's a part of her. It's part of Beverly's character. And so I love that that was mentioned. And then she even said that I was thinking of Jack. I was thinking of, losing people. Dalen Quace. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I was having a moment. And that was the whole reason for Remember Me, was because she was thinking of Jack. Again, very, very nice on just how we get that nugget and we know that he's a part of her story, but we just don't get more of the story, right? So I don't think we did need to know more in Remember Me per se, but at least he was mentioned. I mean, at least there was a few writers out there that really wanted to keep like, hey, Jack was part of the show too, even though he was just not shown a lot or mentioned a lot and everything, but he's still part of their story, right? Not only Beverly's, but Picard's and Wesley's. And yeah, it was definitely important that that was brought up. But this was a full-fledged Beverly episode. So if they didn't mention Jack, that would have been a horrible decision to do. But the next episode that I decided to bring up, and again, I have to bring up a clip because it's all about Jack, and that's Violations. It's a season 5 episode. It is what it is, guys. Troy, Riker, and Beverly were mind raped, okay, from another alien. And of course, hers had to be the loss of Jack. And this is just another confirmation that his death still affects her to this day. So I'm going to go ahead and play that clip. Picard with hair. That's funny.
You shouldn't remember him like this.
Fun fact, that's Gates' actual hair. So Patrick's wearing the rig and Gates has her hair in this dream sequence.
It's good of you to come.
It's the least I can do. You shouldn't remember him like this.
I have to face the fact that he's gone. He's gone. He's gone. He's gone.
You shouldn't remember him like this.
It's good of you to come with me.
It's the least I can do.
You shouldn't remember him like this. It's the least I can do.
Okay, so creepy, very creepy episode, very creepy scene. And of course, that's when they bring in Jack. But I mean, it's supposed to be not a good scene because she's going to confirm his body at the morgue. This is the only time we technically have a scene with Beverly and Jack in the same like sequence. I mean, they're not technically in the same scene, but it's like there's no other episode, guys, that Jack and Beverly are in a scene together. I don't think Doug and Gates actually worked together. He could have been on that slab another day, just did a little one shot, boom, he was done for a couple hours and got paid, and she did another scene. Like, they didn't even have to be in the same room. They probably weren't. I have no idea. Another frustration. We never got a Jack and Beverly scene together. Would have been nice to see that. Would have been nice to see even their chemistry. I think Doug's a good looking guy. I think it would have been nice to see. And one of the things is that I truly, and a lot of the Bev fans believe this, especially the Crusher fans, Beverly loved Jack, loved him. She would, I think, have always chosen Jack over Picard any day. Her love for him was undying. Yes, she had an attraction with Picard and things like that when she was married to Jack, but she never acted on it. So there's that very special love that we just didn't get on screen, that people like Sarah, fanfic writers, I mean, I've even went into fanfic a little bit with Beverly and Picard. We have to create our own stories, right? We have to create our own headcanons because we didn't get it on screen. And it's frustrating because we know it's part of their story. Picard's in this dream sequence, for goodness sakes, because he was there. There was that personal, loss between the both of them. With Picard, his loss of losing his best friend under his command, he felt guilty. That's why he never told Beverly about how he felt, which we're going to be mentioning in this next episode. So I think with this is just, again, just frustration overall. How we could have had more. I mean, this particular scene, I understand Jack was already dead at this point, but other episodes we did not get to see them in anything. Sarah says that scene is in my story, and I mentioned it before. It's a very powerful scene. It's very good. Gates, again, played it off the charts. I think it was important to know that not only while she had to go and look at his body in the morgue, but there's also kind of that story of, how was Wesley told? I think Wesley had mentioned in the bonding that it was Picard that had to tell him that Jack had died. So there is that sense of loss, and that kind of bonded Picard and Beverly in a way, which probably led to their love story because of that loss, right? Jack was very, very, very important to their love story. There probably would never have been one if it wasn't for Jack. I wholeheartedly believe that. And it's just another one of those moments that you can kind of be like, that makes sense, right? That's kind of understandable about where this was going. But yeah, it's, again, our technically only Jack and Beverly scene out of the entire series was him in the morgue. So yeah, that's fun. But I think this next one that I'm going to be mentioning here, and of course, this is going to be a Nema check it out moment because it is super, super important. Very important. Attached. The big Picard and Beverly episode. Finally, them telling how they feel about each other, them sharing a kiss, so to speak. Even in Attached, the first draft was written. They were actually supposed to make love for the first time, but it was cut out. I could understand why. The actual final draft had shown that they were supposed to cuddle, I guess, at the campfire. So when he went and laid down, she kind of crawled in and laid her head on his shoulder and they fell asleep. That would have been nice to see, but again, didn't happen. I have an original script of Attached, and it's heartbreaking when you're reading this out. You're like, oh, what could have been? But what Larry gets to say, the story raises a mystery. Since Picard didn't know Beverly until after Walker Keel had introduced her to Jack, Her remark that the trio spent more and more time together implies she was with Jack on the Stargazer, at least initially, unless it returned to base often, but that seems unlikely. Again, there's a continuity problem, especially by season 7. I think they were just trying to bring out more story that they did not get to tell. So with this episode, they were kind of just throwing it in our faces, right? It was all like Beverly and Picard, boom, 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 all this stuff, their feelings, Jack. She even had mentioned the story that she was talking about, a story where, they took Wesley camping at Belfour Lake and he was throwing manta leaves in the fire and they were popping, and that's when she felt his guilt. And this was a very powerful scene because it was that guilt that kept him from telling her how he felt about her, even after Jack's death. She had said, "Why didn't you ever tell me you were in love with me?" And he said, "You were married to my best friend. I thought it was just infatuation, hormones, whatever. But then I realized they were real, but I felt guilty because I shouldn't have been feeling about that for my best friend's wife." So you're starting to put the puzzle pieces together. And she even mentioned, that's why you didn't want me on the Enterprise 7 years ago. So that's where that first scene that we saw in Encounter at Farpoint, their looks, because he wanted her to leave. He was all like, "If you don't want to be here." And I think bringing that back was perfect because those were on the fans' minds, right? They were always thinking about like, well, what about this scene? Why haven't they mentioned it? This was the moment. Again, Attached is my favorite episode. I think Gates and Patrick together, they have amazing chemistry. It's a fantastic episode. They were able to bounce off each other great, have these emotional moments, have these funny moments. And I'm glad that Jack was mentioned because that was the whole turning point of this will they, won't they relationship. And what was holding them back was Jack Crusher. I will make an honorable mention in the episode. I believe it was when that lieutenant commander had come. It was before Conspiracy. So it was when that admiral was telling Picard, I think there's something's happening. People are changing. I don't know what's going on. And that, I think his name was Remick. And he was interviewing everybody. And when he got to Beverly, he was all like, "Tell me how you feel about the captain." She's all like, "We've worked, I've known him for a very long time." And he's like, "Well, everything's confidential. You could tell me how you feel." And she's like, "What do you mean?" He's all like, "Being under command with the man who is responsible for your husband's death." I remember that scene and I was all like, "Oh no, he didn't." And Beverly's response was classic, where she's like, "My feelings for Captain Picard is irrelevant to this investigation and none of your business." And I was all like, drop the mic. There we go. That's Beverly. I loved it. I was like, I can't believe he did that. But I was so happy by her response. She didn't feel he was responsible for Jack's death, but Picard did. And that plays on later on, right? So I thought that scene was also very, very good. So that's an honorable mention because I forgot to write that in my notes. But going back to Attached, she decides to not pursue this relationship with him because I felt like she was trying to protect herself, because she was listening to his dreams. She was listening to what he was saying. He was telling her, "Oh no, I'm not in love with you anymore," but I'm sure his dreams were saying something else. And if he couldn't even pick what was truth and what was not, she didn't want to put her heart out there, especially when she still was hurting over losing Jack. Like, if she's still hurting over losing Jack, how can she be with someone who is constantly at risk, right? And who doesn't even know what he really wants? She needed to give him that time to figure that out. So as much as it hurts us seeing Beverly walk out the door, she did it for the right reasons. So, but yeah, I definitely think that was super, super important. Now, the last episode that I'm going to mention is, of course, Journey's End. This has nothing to do with Beverly and Jack. It has to do with Wesley. This was Will Wheaton's goodbye episode for Wesley because it was season 7 and they're trying to wrap up these stories. And this is where we kind of go back to the where no one has gone before, where the Traveler was saying that Wesley was special. Traveler comes back, but he uses Jack as, I found it kind of cruel. He used Jack's image to try and get Wesley to join him. That's how I felt. People in the chat can, say something differently, but because he was really trying to get Wesley to become a traveler, he used Jack as a way for him to oh, I'm going to leave Starfleet. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do, and that's why he had that confrontation with Beverly in his quarters where she's all like, so you had an image of your father and now, you're just packing your bags. And it was important for Wesley to decide what was best for him, which is true. But I didn't like how the traveler approached it. But again, we didn't get much for this being Will's final episode. And even having Doug return to play Jack Crusher in his little dream sequence. I wish there was a conversation with Beverly and Wesley talking about Jack, kind of how we had it in the bonding. That would have been a nice full circle moment, especially as they're wrapping up these stories, that they could have had another moment together about losing Jack and how it affected him and how he's now trying to honor his father in a different way, right? Another honorable mention real quick that just kind of clicked into my head was True Q, which was in season 6. And that was with Amanda, who finds out that she's a Q, and she was on the Enterprise as a student under Beverly's care. And she was talking about losing her parents, and Beverly had let her know that she had lost her husband. And I remember there was a moment where Amanda had asked, I could do whatever I want. What would you do if you had these powers? And, Beverly said, I will heal the sick. I would do that. And Amanda's all like, would you bring your husband back? And I loved this moment because Beverly takes a second and goes, oh, Amanda, I don't know. And she says, I don't know if I can make that decision unless I was faced with it. I like that because I feel the reason why Beverly is who she is at this point is because of her loss of Jack. If she were to bring Jack back how he was the moment he died to how she is now, they would have been two totally different people, right? And I kind of feel like Beverly felt like she would have been dishonoring his memory by bringing him back in that moment because it wouldn't have been the same. She wasn't the same Beverly who was married to Jack. She had grown. She was older. She was wiser. And so it's those moments where she just, as much as she would love to have Jack back, she just knew it wasn't going to be the same. And she doesn't want to tarnish that memory of him. Of course, we know she is in love with Picard, but I don't think that was the biggest reason why she had said that. I think it was just because she was trying to honor what she had and she wanted to keep that close to her. When it comes back to Wesley and Journey's End, again, these weren't the words of Jack Crusher. These were the words of the traveler to guide Wesley to become a traveler. So it almost kind of felt like the traveler manipulated Wesley in a way, and Beverly didn't really see that because she didn't know that this was happening. She didn't know the traveler was involved. And at this point, I don't even think Wesley did either. But I, again, really wish we could have had a moment where they did talk about Jack like they did in the bonding. That was the only time we actually had that moment. And so the lack of story, especially with something that was so important to the characters, that's where it's just struggled with me a little bit. But it is what it is. This is why we have fan fiction. As Star Trek: The Next Generation ended, we knew that they were kind of going in that direction with Picard and Beverly, and then stopped at the movies. But when Star Trek Picard happened, that's where it got interesting. Now, I feel very vindicated here because when the thought that Beverly had Picard's son was an idea, everyone was trying to what was the secret? Why was she gone? I had said, if there was a son involved, I hope his name is Jack. a lot of fans were like, no, that's weird. That's her first husband. And I was like, yeah, but that was the whole reason why they were together, was because of Jack Crusher, and it would be honoring his memory. And no one thought that would be a good idea. But sure enough, it was, because here's Jack Crusher. And I was so happy, because that was Terry's way of honoring Jack. He had mentioned that in an interview. He was all like, Jack Crusher was very important to their story. It was Picard's guilt, Beverly's loss. Here they are. They came together at some point in the story. We like to say that was in between each movie, right? So every time the movie started, they had just broken up. Here she has his son, and it is to not only honor her first husband, who was Picard's best friend, but I think Gates had said something in an interview where it was also her way of like, yes, she was hiding Jack, but it was also her way of being like, hey, Picard, if you ever know that you have a son, here it is. And this was a really, really good way to bring Jack into the story. I know they brought Jack in the story, no-win scenario. So he was having the bar moment with Jack, Picard was, and he was talking a story about Jack, and it was a story that Beverly apparently knew. And it was nice that they kind of brought that in. It was just showing how, Jack met to Picard. He says, because Jack made the joke of like, I know she didn't hate you, but to name me after her first husband, he was like, that's just so weird, which was representing a lot of the fans. They were like, that's so weird. But Picard was all like, yeah, but he was my best friend. I would have done the same. Like, he just knew, he approved it. It was like, Jack Crusher, perfect. That's exactly what I would have wanted us to name our son. Right. So love that they did this. Love that his name is Jack. Love that it's still Jack Crusher. He didn't take Picard's name. He is, he was raised by his mom. He is representing the Crusher family, even though, Crusher is not even his family name. Like, he's not related to Jack Crusher at all. This was his mother's married name. He's representing that family in the best way possible. He's representing his brother, who he never, from what we know, never met. And I think that was the best way to just kind of put all together. Like, this is the, Jack Crusher 2.0, right? So I love that they did this. And it just makes me happy that Jack Crusher was, because they only had 10 episodes. So at least we got some kind of story in there. But yeah, that's kind of it, guys. Like, I kind of threw out all those episodes that we had mentions or lack thereof, and wish we had this, wish we had that. If even later on, when you watch this and you want to tweet me or even write on Instagram, feel free with your thoughts. I think this is just, Jack Crusher was super important to the story, and I just wish we had more. And, I know everyone's really gearing hope for Star Trek Legacy. I would love to see Captain Seven and Raffi and Jack, their stories and stuff. And if they were to bring that going, I would love to see that Jack, the OG Jack would be mentioned in some way from Beverly. I would really like to see a story with Beverly and Jack. That was kind of our biggest issue. We never really got that. We got little snippets, we got little mentions, but nothing of, where she's talking a story about, Jack did this, like Picard did with Jack in 10 Forward. So again, that's kind of where I would hope we would get something. Sarah has a comment. She says, do you think, though, when he was posted on the Enterprise G, that he had hyphened his name to Crusher Picard? Some people, I think, thought that. I believe Terry brought up that it's just Crusher. I don't know how accurate that is, obviously, but they still called him Jack Crusher, and I think that's just how they're going to continue it. Could change later on. I don't know, but I think it's just Crusher. Maybe it's Picard Crusher. Maybe he's still just keeping that as his last name, but he threw Picard in there like a middle name. I don't know. It's a headcanon. We could anyone can think of what they want, and that's just how it goes. So yeah, I think this was lots of fun. I hope I was kind of on the same page with you guys. Like I said, Feel free to comment on Twitter or Instagram with your thoughts about Jack and Beverly's story. And yeah, this was lots of fun. I do want to thank Larry Nemechek, even though he has nothing to do with his life, but gotta love his book. I've met Larry a couple of times. He is awesome. You know, it's just been so helpful to learn from his book. So thank you, Larry, for all your hard work. I interviewed you once from the podcast and you were a delight. So yes, thank you so much. And of course, thanks to Gates McFadden, because there will be no Beverly Crusher without her. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for those who had watched and chimed in. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Next time, hope we have some more Crusher Convo fun where we crush in the conversation one episode at a time. All right, guys, bye.
Crusher out.